everyone, I'm Matt Dolan with Dolan Divorce Lawyers in Connecticut, and today what I'm going to talk about is how long the divorce process takes here in Connecticut. So it used to be the case that you could not finalize your divorce until 90 days after you initiated your divorce. And that was even in instances where you had an agreement with your spouse as to the terms of the divorce, you still had to wait those 90 days. Now that law has been phased out where now you can in fact file your divorce and essentially immediately finalize that divorce so long as you and your spouse have an agreement. So if you have negotiated with your spouse the terms of your divorce, obviously that can take some time and that depends on your circumstances, how complicated your finances are and drafting the documents and whatnot. But assuming you do all of that, you and your spouse, you can bring the documents into court. You can, give them to the clerk and, ask that the judge review your paperwork. And in theory, the judge can review and approve and finalize your divorce within a day or two. Some courthouses are a little bit more backed up where it can take a little bit more time to finalize your divorce. So that's a situation where you have an agreement with your spouse. Obviously, that is not the majority of cases, so I'll go over the other scenarios. Another scenario may be you file for your divorce and the opposing party who you have had served, they kind of ignore the process. They don't participate in the process. They're not negotiating. They don't file an appearance with the court, and you still obviously want to get a divorce. In that instance, you cannot finalize your divorce until 30 days after the return date. So when you first file your divorce paperwork, when you have it drafted, you set a return date. And that is, maybe 30 days in the future of when you initially draft your paperwork. And you have to serve your spouse 12 days before that return date. So you may have your spouse served and then, obviously that happens before the return date. And then you file the paperwork after. So you don't file divorce paperwork until after you serve the opposing party. So you file that paperwork and then the return date comes. If the opposing party does not file an appearance or participate in the process, you can file a motion with the court 30 days after that return date asking that they finalize your divorce, and you submit your proposed orders of what you want the court to do. So it's 30 days so long as you serve the opposing party, either in hand or at their house. If there's other methods of service, like you don't know where they live and you have to serve them by publication on the judicial website, in that instance, you have to wait 60 days after the return date in order to finalize your divorce. So those are kind of two less common scenarios. The traditional scenario is you file your divorce and you don't have an agreement right away. There has to be some negotiations back and forth. How long that process takes really depends on your circumstances. It depends on the complexity of your case. So whether there are complicated financial issues or complicated custody issues that need to be worked through. If there are complicated financial issues, you probably have to exchange what's called financial discovery. So that's essentially exchanging financial documents, bank statements, retirement account statements, credit card statements, etc., where you can get an understanding of the full picture of what is going on financially. And you can't really have meaningful negotiations until after that discovery process takes place. How long that process takes really depends on how long it takes you and your spouse to get your documents together, or how long it takes your lawyer to get those documents together. Lawyers can often have busy schedules, and it can be time-consuming to gather and exchange that financial information. Another kind of X factor that changes how long your case will go on is the negotiating process. So after the exchange of financial information, you may be able to directly negotiate with your spouse, or the lawyers may be able to directly negotiate with one another and try to reach an agreement. If they can't reach an agreement directly with one another, they're going to have to ask for court intervention. They may have a family relations pretrial where a neutral family relations mediator will try to help the two parties work out an agreement. Or there may be a meeting with a judge where a judge will hear what both parties have to say and try to help parties reach an agreement. Now, how long it takes those meetings to get scheduled really depends on the schedules of the people involved, the attorneys involved, and also the schedule of the court. So if those negotiating and pretrial processes are unsuccessful, the final step is just a trial, and that's where you go into open court, and it's a judge who is making a decision. A trial can be anywhere from 1 day or half a day to many, many days long. Again, depends on the financial complexity. So generally speaking, the process can be, in the traditional negotiating back and forth type of divorce, the process can be anywhere from a couple months up to a year plus that the trial would take place. Most courts try to get the trial scheduled within 1 year of the case being filed, but there are certain jurisdictions where the courts are just really backed up and they're not getting those trials scheduled within a year. And then once the trial happens and the close of evidence takes place, the judge has 120 days to issue his or her decision. So that obviously prolongs the process a little bit. Separate from the traditional litigation process, parties may go to private mediation. They may go, where they sit down with a mediator and it's just, the two parties meeting with a mediator. That can either happen before the divorce is filed or while the divorce is pending. But that mediation process can, it really depends. Sometimes everything can be worked out in one session, and other times it may take many, many mediation sessions or a couple sessions maybe. And that timeline really depends on the mediator's schedule and the schedule of the parties involved. So generally speaking, it can be a very quick, instant divorce, if everybody reaches an agreement quickly. But the more traditional divorce can be anywhere from a couple of months up to about a year, is kind of the norm. So those are the basics on how long the divorce process takes here in Connecticut. As usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office. And if you are looking for representation in a divorce or family law case, we would invite you to contact our office as well.